Hi everyone, my name is Paige Gunderson and this is my project on dimethyltryptamine. This first slide, I just wanted to throw in this painting. It's a really famous artist named Alex Grey. It's called Collective Vision. He is known for his paintings depicting what it looks like to be on DMT. So dimethyltryptamine is called DMT, sometimes called the Spirit Molecule, Fantasia, the Void, and Dimitri. It is in the hallucinogen family. So there are other similar drugs in this family like LSD, psilocybin or magic mushrooms. The toad is actually probably the closest in molecular formation. Also peyote is in the same family. Here's an image of the molecular formula of DMT. And of course, DMT is a Schedule 1. Because it's considered such an intense and powerful hallucinogen, it's been put in this category. Substances listed under Schedule 1 currently have no accepted medical use and have a high potential for abuse. So DMT is an endogenous substance, which means that it's naturally originating within organisms. So DMT is naturally found in more than 50 species of plants, several animal brains, and there is still currently a lot of debate as to whether or not DMT is actually found in the human brain. Many scientists believe that it's produced by the pineal gland, but this hasn't been proven. One of the most well-known forms of DMT is called ayahuasca. It's otherwise known sometimes as vine of the soul. And it is a decoction that is native to South America. It's made with the Banisteriopsis caapi, or the ayahuasca vine, which is shown pictured on the left, and this picture in the upper right, as well as the Psychotria viridis, which is the chacruna plant. So the brew must contain a minimum of these two plants. So the vine itself contains an MAO inhibitor, several MAO inhibitors, one of them being harmaline. And that's kind of the reason that it's called the vine of the soul, because without the vine, DMT cannot be absorbed into the system when ingested orally. So the vine itself sort of serves as like the gate, you could say, to allow this medicine to be taken into the body. So when the DMT is taken into the body with the presence of an MAO inhibitor, it typically stays in the body for a much longer time, lasting anywhere from 3 to several hours. So the brew itself takes several hours to several days to prepare. Kind of depends on the shamanic tradition of that region. And again, ayahuasca is ingested orally. It's drank in the form of a really thick brew. We call that a decoction, and it has a really bitter, earthy flavor. DMT is also found in a crystalline powder. This is when it's lab created. So when it's synthetically created, it looks like it's a crystally kind of powder form. This powder can be snorted, smoked, or vaped, or injected. However, inhalation, smoked, is the most common route of administration. Some people report the taste of DMT to have something like a burnt plastic taste, while others still report it to kind of have a flowery essence. The effects of these routes have a much shorter duration because our natural monoamine oxidase enzymes break the substance down rapidly. So once it enters the system, we'll get into this later as well, usually takes maybe 1 to 3 minutes to get into the full peak of the high and lasts typically 10 to 30 minutes. So if taken orally, like we said before, it's broken down rapidly by MAO enzymes that are present in our stomach and in our gut. So for this reason, if we were to take it orally, it must be accompanied by a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. When these are used together, DMT can be absorbed into the bloodstream, cross the blood-brain barrier, and it stays in the system longer. So here's kind of an image. You see on here that when we drink ayahuasca, the ayahuasca vine has some of those alkaloids, harmaline, tetrahydroharmine, and these are what prevent our natural inhibitors from breaking down DMT right away. So, when ingested intravenously, inhaled or snorted, DMT passes the blood-brain barrier by a process called active transport. So active transport is an energy facilitated process by which our cells use ATP. So receptor sites open on proteins, but these channels only open when certain carrier chemicals are present. So DMT is transported across our plasma membranes with a magnesium ion. Once it's in the brain, DMT is taken into neural cells through serotonin uptake transporters, or SERTs, on the neural cell's membrane. DMT is a serotonin receptor agonist. So this means it binds to the serotonin and blocks the serotonin receptors, allowing for more DMT to remain in the synaptic clefts of the neural networks. However, DMT is known to work on 5 different receptors of the brain. Without the presence of an MAO inhibitor, it's rapidly broken down into other compounds that are endogenous to the human body, and only a small amount of the original compound is remaining, but it exits in the urine. So DMT is primarily metabolized by monoamine oxidase enzymes that are in our system, and after they've kind of metabolized DMT, only a very small amount is remaining, and it's excreted pretty much right away in urine or feces. From the MAO pathway, several compounds are produced or broken down from DMT. All of these are already found within our bodies. We naturally produce these. And because of that, kind of these precursors that put together what DMT is, it's kind of why they believe that it works so rapidly and so well in our system and doesn't have any really negative side effects. One of those, of course, is different versions of tryptamine. DMT is completely removed from the body within 24 hours. So DMT works on 5 different receptors in the brain, 5-HT2A, TAR, 5-HT1A, sigma-1, and 5-HT2C. So this first one, 5-HT2A, this is a serotonin receptor. This is a 5-hydroxytryptamine receptor. TAAR, this is trace amine associated receptor. So these are monoamine receptors, for example, dopamine, glutamine, and also serotonin. 5-HT1A is 5-hydroxytryptamine 1A. So again, this is another serotonin receptor. However, this one is associated with mood regulation and neuroplasticity. Sigma-1 is a channel that helps to regulate neural voltage in the brain, helps to maintain neural homeostasis, has some anti-inflammatory properties. 5-HT2C, this is another serotonin receptor. This receptor is associated with hallucinogenic manifestations in, of course, DMT, but also in LSD and other hallucinogens. So psychological short-term effects of using DMT. As we said before, once it enters the brain, effects have a rapid onset. Of course, this is with inhalation, injection, or snorting. Effects peak at 1 to 3 minutes, lasts 10 to 30 minutes. I've never heard it lasting or seen anywhere written lasting longer than 30 minutes. However, once what it is accompanied with an MAO inhibitor, effects take 30 to 60 minutes to even kick in. Effects peak at 1 to 2 hours and can last several hours. So users report, while being under the influence of DMT, intense visual hallucinations, including bright and colorful fractal geometric patterns that can be seen with the eyes open or closed, feeling of transcendence into an alternate realm, perceiving and communicating with otherworldly beings, angels, aliens, God, people who have passed on, dissociation, so out-of-body experiences, auditory and visual distortions, altered sense of time and space. Often people say that they go on these journeys that, go through millennia of galaxies and come back only realizing it's been 10 minutes. intense euphoria, increased creativity, of course, spiritual enlightenment, and most everyone characterizes their experiences as life-changing. Physiological short-term effects: dilated eyes, elevated heart rate, higher blood pressure, elevated levels of endorphins and hormones. Of course, some of the negative potential side effects that go along with this are hypertension, agitation, paranoia. In rare cases, seizures. This is usually when accompanied with other drugs. Involuntary rapid eye movement, dizziness, muscular coordination issues, headache. Nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea is typically accompanied with ayahuasca, and we'll get into that a little more. So, of course, all of these have the potential for. As far as long-term side effects of the use of DMT, there has been no evidence to support that in a healthy brain, DMT creates a dependence, that you can become addicted to it. So of course, there are no withdrawal symptoms from DMT. There's no evidence showing that DMT negatively changes the brain permanently. And of course, DMT cannot create a tolerance. Of course, as with any drug, there are risks. The slide before, we kind of discussed not being any long-term side effects, but that's only with a healthy brain. So DMT does have the potential to worsen certain pre-existing mental health conditions, especially schizophrenia. And of course, all hallucinogens run a small risk of HPPD, in which when not on a drug, you still have persisting hallucinations. There is a small chance of developing serotonin syndrome. The likelihood of this increases greatly when you are on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So because DMT blocks the reuptake of serotonin, if you are also taking an SSRI that's already blocking the uptake of serotonin, you run the chance of flooding your neural synapses with too much serotonin. And in certain times, this can lead to death. So never take it with SSRIs. Of course, don't take it with opioids, hypertensive, appetite suppressants, no antihistamines, alcohol, barbiturates, antipsychotics, and never take DMT with CNS depressants like Xanax. The specific origin of ayahuasca is still unknown. However, oral tradition in Colombia states that the vine's origin is near the Napuruna River, which is an Ecuadorian tributary to the Amazon. So the Amazon rainforest has tons of micro ecosystems, and each of these ecosystems contains plants specific to that particular system. So any plants that are widespread throughout the Amazon were transferred by humans, and the ayahuasca vine is one of these. The reason for this is that shamanic tradition shows that there's been an interconnected relationship between the shamans of different regions, and so they believe that perhaps it was the shamans who transferred these plants. So DMT in its natural form has a really rich and long history. The first proof that we found of human use of DMT dates back to 2130 BC, where 2 pipes were found in Argentina containing trace amounts of seeds from the N-dimethyltryptamine plant. As we said before, there are over 50 plants that we know of so far that contain DMT. So this is kind of our first historical proof that DMT was used by humans. Going up to 1200 BC, some snuffing devices, so snorting devices, were found in Peru, and these were also containing trace amounts of DMT. The first historical proof of shamanic ayahuasca was found in a pouch in Bolivia in a cave. However, within that cave, signs were found showing human activity dating back to 4,000 or 5,000 years. So, we can tell now that ayahuasca has been used for several thousand years. Of course, we're not exactly sure when it started, the, long-standing history. The first ethnobotanical account of ayahuasca was published in 1873 by an English botanist named Richard Spruce. So again, main ingredients in ayahuasca: are Psychotria viridis, which is the chacruna, and the Banisteriopsis caapi, which is the ayahuasca vine. So here I've got pictures of the chacruna, leaves and dried, and here's the ayahuasca vine. So to create ayahuasca, the leaves and vines are typically used in combination with other plants. It just kind of depends on the region based on the shamanic tradition of that area. So they are collected from the rainforest. While they're being collected, the shaman is usually there blowing a specific type of tobacco smoke called mopacho, and he's blowing it onto these plants as they're taking away the bark and leaves just to kind of bless the plant and thank it. So once the ayahuasca vine is brought back, it's pounded out into a really splintery texture while blessed with this smoke. Then all of the plants are put together in a large pot with water and boiled down. It's continued to be boiled down for several hours until the water is half evaporated. Then more water is added. So this process can go on anywhere from several hours to several days, of course, again, depending on the regional tradition. Once the correct consistency has been reached, the medicine is ready to be used in ceremony. So this is actually called a decoction because it's boiled down and reduced. So the purpose of ceremony is for participants to partake in spiritual and emotional healing. Ikaros, or songs, are a very important aspect of ceremony. There are many different ikaros, sometimes hundreds that a shaman might know. Each song has a specific role in healing and in the ceremony. And typically these songs are passed down generationally within the shaman's family. Other times songs will come to them from the plants themselves. During the beginning of a ceremony, it's very common, as we said before, for physical purging, so throwing up or diarrhea. Traditionally, this is believed that the ayahuasca physically binds to spiritual toxins and negative energies inside the participant, and the body purges it out in order to clear a way for the medicine to bring a deeper, more inner healing. So some advice: ayahuasca is not a party drug. It should be respected and used ceremonially. When you are partaking in ayahuasca ceremony, you should always bring a question or a problem, something that you're looking for resolve or answer. More will be revealed in the coming days, months, and sometimes even years. So similar to an injury, healing does not happen overnight. DMT opens the door to opportunity for self-exploration. It's also been said that if something comes out in ceremony, for example, maybe trauma or a panic attack, it's often released and permanently released from the participant. So current recreational use. Of course, while ayahuasca is used ceremonially, DMT is used recreationally and is not guided by a shaman. It's typically smoked using some sort of vaporizing device, such as a dab rig or a pipe. While ayahuasca ceremonies take several hours, smoking is typically about a 15-minute trip. So typical doses might include 10 to 20 milligrams for light, 20 to 40 for a standard, or 40 to 60 for a very strong effect. Scientific studies have shown that 20 to 40 milligrams produce a full hallucinogenic experience. So I put a link to the video in here. This is just like a quick 10-minute video. I'm not going to show it right now, but Vice went inside of a home DMT lab. So it just kind of shows this guy how he gets a plant powder from South America and using lab equipment extracts the DMT. He explains, of course, and many people discuss this, that DMT is fundamentally very, very different from other hallucinogens, not only because of the fact that you cannot create a tolerance or dependence, but more so in the nature of the experience itself. So unfortunately, there is currently no medical use for DMT. Reason for this is, of course, DMT is listed as a Schedule 1. Schedule 1 says there's no medical use and a high likelihood for abuse. Of course, many people believe that DMT doesn't have a likelihood for abuse. Of course, I think any drug does have a possibility for abuse, but because the nature of DMT is so different than other drugs, it's more spiritual and kind of enlightening in nature. A lot of people really kind of argue that DMT should not be on this Schedule 1. The most well-known study that was done on DMT was conducted by Dr. Rick Strassman. So Rick Strassman is a highly accomplished medical doctor and research scientist who went to Stanford and then later went on to get his medical degree at Yeshiva University at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. That was in New York. And then he later went to UC Davis, where he conducted a lot of research and worked in the psychiatry department. After which he ended up going to the University of New Mexico and worked in their psychiatry department there. And he was later awarded the Research Scientist Award for his research at UNM in investigating the function of the pineal gland, his clinical research on DMT, as well as his research on Alzheimer's. So in addition to authoring many books and hundreds of scientific journals, he is very well known for authoring the book DMT, the Spirit Molecule. This book documented his studies with DMT, and in 2010, he later co-produced a documentary with the same name. So in 1990 to 1995 at the University of New Mexico, Dr. Strassman conducted a government-funded research study researching the effects of DMT on the human brain. His study was founded on the psychopharmacology of serotonin, of course, because of DMT's major role in the serotonin receptors in the brain. He was the first scientist to study hallucinogens since Timothy Leary's research on LSD in the 60s. So during this study, he administered over 400 doses of DMT intravenously to nearly 6 volunteers. So half of his subjects reported encountering godlike beings, and almost all experienced a transcendent state, reporting life-altering revelations and experiences. So what his study really kind of determined was the lack of dependence and specifically the lack of the tolerance of the drug. And this really differentiated it from other hallucinogens. Dr. Strassman ended up halting his study because he felt it was irresponsible that he was bringing people into this spiritual realm only for the sake of science. So while there is no current medical use for DMT, there are a lot of avenues that are thought DMT could be used in research studies. First and foremost, ayahuasca has the potential in treating anxiety, depression, and substance abuse. And because of its role on the sigma-1 receptor, it's theorized that the use of DMT could increase the production of anti-stress and antioxidant proteins. So as a result, DMT could help to prevent free radicals in the blood, working to prevent and possibly neutralize cancer cells. And as we learned earlier, the sigma-1 receptor also plays a really big role in maintaining neural homeostasis. So when using DMT with the sigma-1 receptor, it's thought that it could help to reduce neuronal inflammation and reduce ischemic neurodegeneration. So ischemic neurodegeneration happens when the blood is kind of cut off, the blood flow in the brain. So the brain tissue starts to degenerate because of a lack of oxygen. So combined with this and the fact that DMT also could contribute to neuroregenerative and neurorestorative processes by helping the survival of microglia cells, this could potentially be an avenue for Alzheimer's studies. DMT also might affect the rate of genetic transcription associated with synaptic plasticity. This could help to improve cognitive processes like memory and attention. So just to sum it up, DMT is a very powerful hallucinogen, and for this reason it's categorized as a DEA Schedule 1. DMT is a naturally occurring compound that's found in plants and animal brains. For DMT's effect to take place by oral ingestion, it must be accompanied by a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. DMT is a serotonin agonist, which means it prevents the reuptake of serotonin in the synapses. DMT works on 5 different receptors in the brain. that we know of. DMT's effects include intense visualizations, primarily fractal in nature, encounters with sentient beings, spiritual enlightenment, and out-of-body experiences. However, a bad trip is also possible. DMT can worsen pre-existing mental health conditions, primarily schizophrenia, and should absolutely not be taken with SSRIs or CNS depressants. Ayahuasca is a ceremony or brew that has been used for thousands of years in South America for spiritual healing and enlightenment. And there's no current medical use for DMT. However, there are many opportunities for studies, including depression, anxiety, addiction, and neuroplasticity problems. Here's one more painting by Alex Gray. This is called Net of Being. It's painted in 2003. And references are to follow. Thank you.